The text message from his assistant was curt and unambiguous. Charlotte's recital, 6 p.m. Lincoln Hall, main auditorium. Gavin Pierce didn't question it. He rarely questioned anything anymore. That was the arrangement. He handled the empire, other people handled the details. He left the office at 5:28, late by his standards, but with enough margin to make the drive uptown. His Tesla glided silently through the city, its tinted windows buffering him from the noise and clutter of streets he no longer walked. His suit jacket hung untouched in the back seat. The shirt he wore, tailored, white, pristine, remained stiff at the collar despite the late spring heat. It fit too well for him to notice how uncomfortable it was. He arrived at Lincoln Hall at 5:57. A parking space had been reserved. Someone opened the car door before he had time to reach for it himself. "Mr. Pierce, welcome," the attendant said, then gestured to the entrance. "Main auditorium, second floor." Gavin nodded and climbed the stone steps. The foyer was busy with other parents, some in jeans, others in cocktail dresses. He caught glimpses of kids carrying violin cases and wearing ballet slippers. For a moment, he panicked that he had the wrong kind of recital. But the assistant had said Lincoln Hall, main auditorium, 6 p.m. He settled into the back row, still checking his phone, eyes flickering to the stage that sat empty under soft amber light. He texted his assistant a brief here. 5 minutes passed, the house lights dimmed. A small girl with a trembling bow took the stage and began a hesitant rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle. Gavin's eyes narrowed. The girl was Charlotte. He sat up straighter. Another child followed, a dance duet. A boy sang off-key. Piano keys stumbled over a Disney song. Parents clapped gently, smiling at the imperfections, but Gavin sat still, his mouth tightening. His daughter wasn't in this recital. His hand curled around his phone, thumb ready to demand an explanation. Then a figure slipped into the aisle beside him, brushing past his knees as she sat. He glanced sideways, annoyed. And then he froze. Dark auburn hair pulled into a loose braid, a faint freckle just under her eye. She was older now, sure, but not in a way that time had dulled. If anything, she looked more real than she had back then. Less like a memory and more like something that had been quietly growing in the corner of his mind all these years. "June," he said, before he even realized the name had left his mouth. She turned, paused, looked straight at him. "Gavin," her voice held both disbelief and a thread of knowing. He didn't move, couldn't. June Arden had once known him before the boardrooms, before the expensive suits and the cold professionalism. Back when he'd had calloused hands from helping his uncle fix up their broken-down house outside of Maple Hollow. Back when he played guitar at open mic nights and believed he might become someone different than who he had become. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, voice barely audible beneath the applause for a cello solo finishing up. He shook his head, eyes flickering to the stage again. "I thought this was my daughter's recital. It's not." A beat passed. She tilted her head. "You sure?" He swallowed, looked around. "I think I'm in the wrong place." She smiled, but it wasn't mocking. It was gentler, worn in the way only someone who had weathered life without bitterness could smile. "You were always in the wrong place at the right time," she said. He didn't answer, he didn't know how to. On stage, a child announced the next piece, another piano duet. A familiar melody began, something classical, slow. Gavin barely heard it, his world had shifted. What were the odds? June Arden here. In this city, in this building, sitting next to him as if she hadn't vanished from his life without a trace 14 years ago. She watched the stage, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There was a tension in her posture he hadn't noticed before, something protective. A few rows up, a teenage girl with curly dark hair waited with her hands folded in her lap, staring down at the program. Gavin glanced between the girl and June, then looked again. The resemblance was there, not in an obvious way, but in the set of her shoulders, in the way she adjusted the sleeves of her dress, like June used to do when she was nervous. "Is that your daughter?" he asked. June nodded, her name, Iris. He felt the name like a tap on the chest, small, startling. "She's how old?" The math was already scratching at the back of his mind, uninvited. 13, June said, then turned to look at him fully. Yours. He hesitated. Charlotte, she's 7. This was her first recital, or it was supposed to be. June's brow lifted. You missed it. No, he looked down grim. I was sent to the wrong auditorium. Her expression didn't change, but something softened around her eyes. Does that happen a lot? He didn't answer. The music swelled on stage. June turned back, but not before he caught the way her fingers curled over the program, how she blinked a few times too quickly. I didn't know you were in the city, he said quietly. I'm not, we live upstate, just came down for this. Maple Hollow. She shook her head. Redbridge, 2 towns over. Of course she wasn't in Maple Hollow anymore. That place had burned through people like kindling. He'd left too, but she'd stayed longer, long enough that he thought she might never leave. She still wore that same soft linen scent he remembered, the kind that didn't come from perfume but from the way someone lived, a warm house, clean laundry on the line, sunlight through windows. How have you been? He asked, though it felt like an absurd question after more than a decade. She smiled faintly. Good days and bad days, but I like the quiet. Iris keeps me grounded. Gavin nodded, suddenly unsure of everything he thought he knew. His hands rested on his knees. The urge to leave, to text his assistant and snap at whoever had bungled the recital location, was still there, but quieter now. Something else was louder. The presence of this woman beside him, tethered to a past he never talked about anymore. I should let you watch, he said, gesturing to the stage. June tilted her head. You can stay if you want. He didn't answer right away, but he didn't leave. The duet ended. Iris stepped onto the stage with another girl. She sat down at the piano, her posture perfect. June leaned forward slightly. Gavin watched the girl's hands hover over the keys. And then she played. A Chopin nocturne, simple but rich with feeling. The kind of piece you didn't choose unless you understood silence. Gavin didn't realize he was holding his breath until the last note hung in the air. The applause was loud, earnest. Gavin glanced sideways and caught the way June's hand reached up to her cheek, brushing something away. She's good, he said quietly. June nodded. She works hard. The lights came up a few moments later. The house rustled with movement. I should go find her, June said, standing but not hurrying. He stood too. Their eyes met again and something passed between them, not quite a question, not yet an answer. If you're not rushing back, she said, you could say hello. He hesitated, looked toward the lobby, then back at her. I'd like that, he said. And that was how the suits cracked, not with a bang but with an unexpected recital, a wrong turn, and the sound of a familiar name spoken again after far too long. The hallway outside the auditorium buzzed with post-recital energy, clutches of parents talking over each other, kids in various states of costume and disarray, teachers hugging students and offering half-whispered praise. Gavin stood just behind June, his hands in his pockets, watching her scan the crowd. There, she said, nodding toward a bench near the vending machines. Iris sat with her bag tucked under one leg, scrolling on her phone with the detached calm of someone used to waiting. When she looked up and saw June, a small smile flickered across her face. It was subtle, but it was there. June turned back to Gavin. She's not great with strangers. He nodded. Neither am I. That earned him a real smile. They walked over, their steps out of sync. June reached her daughter first. Hey, kiddo. Iris looked up again, her expression shifting slightly when she noticed Gavin. She tilted her head the same way June did when she was assessing something, trying to decide whether it mattered. This is an old friend of mine, June said gently. Gavin. Hi, Iris said, polite but cautious. Hi, Gavin returned, unsure whether to offer his hand or just let the moment be. Iris studied him, her gaze sharp. Then she shrugged, slipped her phone back into her bag and said, You missed the best piece. Gavin blinked, caught off guard by her dry humor. I heard it, he said. From the back, it was beautiful. She narrowed her eyes just slightly, as if testing his sincerity. Then she looked at June and said, Can we get something to eat now? We could, June replied, glancing at Gavin. He didn't wait for an invitation. "There's a place a block away," he said. "Quiet, good food, if you're not heading straight back." June hesitated, searching her daughter's face. "I'm hungry," Iris said, then added, "as long as I don't have to talk much." June smiled, the kind that came from living with a teenager long enough to stop needing full sentences. They walked together, the city warming under the evening's glow. Gavin held the door to the cafe open for them, instinct more than courtesy, and they slid into a booth near the back. A place that didn't need reservations or reservations about who they used to be. Over plates of roasted chicken and warm bread, Gavin asked a few careful questions. Iris answered with brief, articulate replies, punctuated by long silences and the occasional smirk that suggested she was always listening, even when she wasn't talking. She wasn't like Charlotte, who asked 100 questions before dessert, but she reminded him of June in other ways, not just the face but the manner, calm, thoughtful, a little too serious for someone her age. June stayed mostly quiet while they ate. She watched Iris with a steadiness that told its own story, one of long nights, early mornings, doctor visits, school meetings, music lessons. The kind of life Gavin had insulated himself from by hiring the best tutors and nannies money could buy. When Iris excused herself to use the restroom, Gavin leaned forward slightly. "She's remarkable," he said. June looked down at her water glass, fingers tracing the rim. "She's her own person, always has been." There was something in her tone, not pride exactly, something deeper, a recognition of weight carried alone. "Her father?" he asked quietly. June met his eyes, not around. "He didn't push, he just nodded." "And Charlotte?" she asked after a pause. He sighed. "Her mom left when she was 2. We get the occasional postcard." June's expression shifted. Not surprise, recognition maybe, that they'd both lived long enough to know love could vanish without ceremony. "She likes dance?" she asked. "Apparently," he said. "I didn't know until the school recommended the program. She doesn't talk about feelings, but she dances like they're pouring out of her." June smiled. Some things skip language. He nodded. Iris returned, slid back into her seat, and announced, "They had a family of pigeons nesting in the bathroom vent." June raised an eyebrow. "Is that a guess or a discovery?" "They're loud," Iris said, then looked at Gavin. "This your first recital mess-up?" "Unfortunately, no," he admitted. "Last year I sat through a third-grade spelling bee before realizing Charlotte's science fair was next door." Iris almost smiled. "Maybe keep a checklist." "Maybe I should," he said. They finished eating as the sky outside darkened. When the check came, Gavin reached for it instinctively. "No," June said quietly. "It's just dinner," he replied. "That's not the point." He paused, then slid the check toward her without another word. Outside, the wind had picked up. June pulled her jacket tighter around her. Iris walked a few paces ahead, earbuds in, oblivious to whatever passed between the adults. "Do you remember that night at the fire tower?" June asked suddenly, her voice low. He looked at her, surprised. "Senior year," she said, "middle of October. You brought that old thermos full of cocoa." "I remember. You talked about New York like it was already yours." He laughed once. "I was an idiot." "You were hungry, not the same thing." She stopped at the corner. Iris was still walking. "I should catch up," she said. "Yeah," he said, though something in him wanted to ask her to stay, to say more. She turned to go, then paused. "You're not who I thought you'd become." He wasn't sure if that was praise or disappointment. Before he could ask, she caught up with Iris, wrapping an arm around her shoulder in that instinctive maternal way. Gavin stood there for a long moment, watching them go. Then he pulled out his phone. He opened his messages and started typing. "To assistant. Where was Charlotte's recital?" He hit send, then added another message. "Next time make sure it's the right one, I missed it." He didn't expect a reply right away. He slid the phone back into his coat, stepped off the curb and walked into the night air. Something inside him had shifted, not dramatically, not yet. But it had shifted. And something told him, this wasn't the last time he'd see June Arden. The next morning, Gavin sat at the breakfast table in his apartment, stirring his coffee as Charlotte smeared jam onto toast with the unfiltered determination of a 7-year-old. Across from him, her brow was furrowed in concentration. "You didn't see the dance," she said. "I know," he replied, his voice quieter than usual, "and I'm sorry." Charlotte glanced up. Her eyes weren't angry, not exactly, just expectant, like she was used to apologies from grown-ups that didn't change anything. "I practiced for weeks," she added, pushing her toast aside now. "I messed up the schedule," he admitted. "That's on me." A pause. "Miss Tenley said I looked like a dragonfly." He smiled cautiously. "A beautiful one." "No," she said, "a powerful one." He let the words settle between them. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. She opened it. Inside was a silver pin in the shape of a dragonfly. Her fingers hovered above it. "This isn't a prize." "No," he said, "it's a promise." Her lips pressed together, trying to stay indifferent, but her hand closed over the pin, and that was enough. Later that day, between back-to-back meetings, Gavin found himself opening his phone and searching Redbridge, NY. It was a small town, far enough from the city to be inconvenient, quiet, green, a place where weekends probably felt like weekends. He stared at the search results longer than he meant to. That night he wrote June a message, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that too. It wasn't until the third evening after the recital that he saw her name in his inbox, an email with the subject line, "Misplaced recitals and other minor catastrophes." He opened it. "Hey, Iris found your LinkedIn. She says you look like someone who teaches emotional detachment for money." I told her that was harsh. "Thanks for dinner. It meant something, even if we didn't say everything. If you ever find yourself in Redbridge, there's a fall fair in 2 weeks. Iris plays in the community ensemble, low stakes, outdoor stage, no assigned seating to get wrong. No pressure. June." He read the message 3 times, unsure of what surprised him more, that she reached out or that she'd left the door so carefully ajar. That weekend, Charlotte was with her mother's sister, one of the few people she trusted without reservation. Gavin drove upstate. Redbridge wasn't much. A library, a hardware store, 3 cafes with chalkboard menus. The town square had bunting in orange and rust red strung from lamp posts. The fair hadn't started yet, but signs were up. He parked and walked for a while, unsure of whether he'd actually planned to find her or just wander. He passed the music shop first, small with faded lettering and a chalkboard sign that read guitar restringing 2-day turnaround. Then a pottery studio. Then, finally, a community notice board full of dog-walking offers and lost mittens. And then there she was. Across the street, outside a cafe called Wren, June was sitting at a patio table with a mug in her hands. A worn paperback opened beside her. Her braid was tucked beneath a thick scarf, and she had that same unhurried stillness she'd always had when she was waiting for something worth showing up for. He crossed the street. She looked up before he said a word. "Couldn't stay away?" she asked, not unkindly. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you." "You found the town. That's 90% of the battle." She gestured to the seat across from her. He sat. The table was small, their knees almost touched. "Did you come just for this?" she asked, voice low. "No," he said, then added, "Yes." She smiled, but it was softer this time, like she knew it cost him something to say that. "Iris is with the ensemble," she said. "Rehearsals all afternoon. She'll be around tomorrow." Gavin nodded. He looked around, taking in the narrow streets, the storefronts painted in muted pastels. The pace here made everything in him slow down. "You look like someone who forgot how to be bored," June said gently. He turned to her. "I don't think I've ever been bored, not really." "You should try it, it's underrated." They didn't talk about the past, not yet. They just walked, past the farmer's market, past the pond with the duck-feeding sign. She told him about the school where she taught part-time art classes, about Iris's stubborn refusal to give up piano even when they couldn't afford formal lessons. He listened. When he asked if she ever missed the city, she said, "Sometimes, but I missed myself more." That night he stayed at a bed and breakfast near the old rail line. No television, a room that smelled like lavender and worn pages. In the morning he found himself walking to the fairgrounds early. The stage was being set, folding chairs lined in rows, local kids tuning instruments off to one side. And then there she was. Iris, dressed in black, sheet music folded under one arm, moving with that same composed presence he remembered from the recital. June appeared beside him, holding 2 coffees. "You came back," she said. He nodded. "I wanted to hear her play properly." They sat. The sky above was soft with clouds. The air smelled like wood smoke and cider. When Iris took the stage, Gavin didn't look away, not once. She played a short solo, then joined the ensemble for a fuller piece. Her hands moved with clarity, her gaze fixed forward. She didn't smile, but she didn't need to. When it ended, Gavin clapped, genuinely, loudly. June didn't say anything, but her fingers brushed lightly against his. It wasn't a romantic moment, not yet. But it was something, a thread, quiet and real, threading back through time. Afterward, Iris joined them, a paper cup of cocoa in hand. "You made it again," she said to Gavin. "I'm starting to get better at that," he replied. She nodded once, then added, "You looked less tense this time." June gave her a look. "What?" Iris said. "It's a compliment." They walked the fair together, ate fresh donuts dusted in cinnamon sugar. June bought Iris a scarf from a local vendor. Gavin browsed without really meaning to until he found a hand-carved wooden dragonfly small enough to fit in his palm. He bought it without a word. Later, as the afternoon sun filtered through the changing leaves, Gavin stood by his car, hand resting on the open door. June stepped closer. "You going back tonight?" He nodded. "Charlotte's got a school thing Monday." June hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket. She pressed a folded piece of paper into his hand. "She's playing again next month. Winter concert, nothing fancy, but you're welcome." He looked down at the paper, then back at her. "You sure?" "I wouldn't have written it if I was." There was no kiss, no dramatic goodbye. Just a lingering glance. And a long drive back to the city, with something warm sitting quietly in his chest. November crept into the city on a hush of wind and early shadows. Gavin noticed it in the way the mornings darkened, in how Charlotte's steps echoed louder on the schoolyard pavement, in the bite of cold on his hands when he forgot gloves in the rush to the car. Work hadn't slowed, it never did. End-of-year reports, forecast meetings, a merger simmering in the background that no one dared name until the ink was dry. His phone buzzed like a second pulse. But somewhere between the emails and strategy decks, he found himself checking the weather in Redbridge more than he meant to. He still had the folded paper June gave him, details for Iris's winter concert, written in neat, slanted handwriting. He hadn't told anyone about it, not his assistant, not his board. He blocked out the day on his own calendar. The morning of the concert, he picked Charlotte up from school early. She emerged from the building with her backpack slung low and her winter hat half over her ears. "We're going on a trip," she asked as she buckled in. "Just for the night," he said, "to hear someone play piano." She looked sideways at him, uncertain. "Do I know them?" "No," he admitted, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, "but I think you might like her." They drove north, the roads narrowed, the buildings gave way to trees. Charlotte pressed her forehead to the window as the leaves blurred by, gold and copper and nearly bare branches, the last of autumn folding inward. She didn't ask where they were going. She was used to being shuttled, rerouted, scheduled. But Gavin saw the moment she noticed this wasn't like other drives. There were no stops at high-rise hotels or city offices, no assistants trailing behind them. They arrived in Redbridge just before sunset. The concert was held in a restored church, small, wooden, with tall arched windows and strings of lights tucked along the beams. Inside, folding chairs had been arranged in clean rows. A table near the entrance offered cider in paper cups. Charlotte hovered close to him, holding her coat. Then June appeared. She didn't wave, didn't call out. Just walked up, the same steady presence she always carried, as if no amount of time could erode it. "Hey," she said, a smile tugging at the edge of her mouth. "Hi," Gavin replied and stepped slightly to the side. "This is Charlotte." June crouched down a bit. "Hi, Charlotte, I'm June." Charlotte looked up at her. "Do you play piano too?" "Nope, I burn toast and sing off-key, but I listen really well." Charlotte cracked a tiny smile. June stood. "Iris is backstage. I'll save you seats." The three of them settled near the center, 2 rows back. Charlotte sat between them, swinging her legs. Gavin handed her a cup of cider. She cradled it with both hands, warming her fingers. Then the lights dimmed. A few students played first, sweet, uncertain pieces that carried through the small space like whispered stories. Charlotte watched intently, her expression unreadable. Then Iris walked on stage. She wore a navy sweater and black pants, her hair pinned simply. No theatrics, no effort to steal the moment, and still, she held the stage like it belonged to her. The music began Ravel this time, fluid, complex, full of restrained emotion. Gavin watched Charlotte's posture change, her spine straightening slightly, her hands still now on her lap. She was leaning in. He glanced at June. She was watching her daughter with a quiet, unwavering pride, her hands clasped loosely together, her lips moving slightly as if echoing the melody. When the last note lingered into silence, Charlotte leaned toward Gavin and whispered, "That was really good." "I know," he whispered back. The audience applauded, and Iris nodded once before walking off stage. After the concert, people lingered. Kids reunited with parents, teachers smiled behind the refreshment table. Gavin followed June and Charlotte down a hallway lined with old framed photographs of choir groups and winter plays. Iris emerged from a side room, her cheeks flushed from the stage lights. "You came," she said, her voice as measured as always, but the spark in her eyes gave her away. "I brought someone this time," Gavin said, resting a hand lightly on Charlotte's shoulder. Iris gave Charlotte a nod. "Hey." "Hey," Charlotte returned, then added, "That piece you played, it was like a snowstorm, but like, warm." Iris blinked, caught off guard, then her expression shifted. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about it." The four of them stood there, the hallway thick with the smell of pine cleaner and old wood, none of them rushing to leave. Later, June offered cocoa at her place. Gavin hesitated, but Charlotte looked up at him and said, "Can we?" The Arden house was small but warm, the walls lined with paintings that looked like they had been made slowly, with care. The living room had a pellet stove humming softly. Charlotte and Iris sat cross-legged on the floor with mugs, talking in soft tones about school and music and what snow tasted like when you caught it on your tongue. Gavin stood in the kitchen, watching June pour more cocoa. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked, not looking at him yet. "For this, for the concert, for making space." She handed him a mug, their fingers brushing. "You're different," she said, not accusing, just observing. "So are you." They didn't need to say more, the room carried it. The low hum of two kids finding common ground, the steady, quiet pulse of something old finding its shape again. Before they left, Charlotte reached into her coat pocket and handed Iris the silver dragonfly pin. "You can borrow it," she said, "for when you play next time." Iris took it like it was something fragile and rare. In the car, driving back through the dark, Charlotte said, "She's really cool." "Yeah," Gavin replied, his hands relaxed on the wheel. "She is." A pause. "And June's nice. You should be her friend again." He glanced at her. "You think so?" Charlotte nodded. "You talk different around her." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. He drove on, the headlights carving a quiet path forward. Snow came earlier than expected that December. Gavin stood at the window of his apartment, phone pressed to his ear, listening as his assistant rattled off calendar changes and last-minute reschedulings. Outside, the city blurred in white. Heavy flakes drifted down between the buildings, softening the sharp lines of everything. He interrupted mid-sentence. "Clear the 22nd, all of it." There was a pause, but the year-end presentation. I'll handle it before then, he said. Clear it. Another pause, then yes, Mr. Pierce. He hung up before he could second-guess himself. That night Charlotte stood on a stool in the kitchen, decorating sugar cookies. There was flour on her cheek and mismatched socks on her feet. She squinted at her lopsided tree and frowned. "It's laning," she muttered. He reached over and adjusted it gently with a fingertip, still standing. She looked up at him. "Are we going back to Redbridge?" "If we're invited." She gave a shrug. "I already packed my scarf just in case." He hadn't mentioned anything to June, hadn't confirmed anything, but something in him trusted it would be okay. The kind of trust that doesn't come from certainty, but from recognition. On the 22nd, they drove through the snow. Redbridge looked like a Christmas card, wreaths in windows, porch lights glowing, kids dragging sleds behind them in the street. Charlotte spotted Iris before Gavin did. She was shoveling the walkway in front of their house, bundled in a coat 2 sizes too big. June opened the door before they even knocked. "Thought you might show up," she said. "You said you'd be baking," Gavin replied. "I also said it might be chaos." He stepped inside, Charlotte at his side. The house smelled like cinnamon and butter and something floral beneath it all. Warm, layered, lived in. Iris and Charlotte fell into rhythm quickly. They didn't need orchestrating. Some kids just clicked. June handed Gavin a mug of tea, not cocoa this time. He leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her roll out dough with quiet precision. "You always this good at making things from scratch." "Only when someone small is watching," she said, nodding toward the living room where the girls were now stringing popcorn. He studied her face, the soft lines near her eyes, the comfort in the way she moved through her space. He felt it in his chest again, that subtle shift, the pull toward something that asked for presence, not performance. "You've built a good life here," he said. "I didn't know what I was doing when I started," she admitted. "I just knew I wanted things to feel different, simpler, honest." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know what I was doing either. I still don't half the time." She turned to him, hands dusted in flour. "Then maybe you're finally on the right track." That evening they ate at the kitchen table, just the four of them, plates full of roast vegetables and soft rolls, and the kind of laughter that comes in small bursts between stories. Later, when the girls were asleep, Charlotte curled on the couch under a thick blanket, Iris in her room, June and Gavin stepped onto the back porch. The snow was still falling, gentle now. The world was hushed. He handed her the wooden dragonfly he'd bought at the fall fair, the one he hadn't found the right moment to give. She took it in her palm, eyes soft. "You kept it." "I think I bought it for the wrong reason," he said. "At first I thought I wanted to prove something, but then I realized it reminded me of her, of Charlotte, and of Iris too, strong and delicate at the same time." June traced the wings with her thumb. He looked at her, really looked. "I wasn't ready back then for this, for any of it." "I know," she said, "neither was I." They stood in the silence, breath visible between them, the kind of quiet that asked nothing but honesty. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I want to keep showing up for her, for Charlotte, maybe for you too." She stepped closer, then show up. No promises, no declarations, just that simple truth between them. A willingness to try again, slower this time, with open hands. He reached for her hand, she let him. The porch light flickered behind them. Inside, the house hummed with the ordinary magic of safety and warmth. And in the space between who they were and who they had become, something real took root. Not dramatic, not perfect, but true.